Hi, I'm Rashmi from Just Tutors, and today we are going to learn about sexual reproduction. Under this topic, we are going to cover the two objectives. The first is asexual reproduction and the second is sexual reproduction. Two of the part of asexual reproduction we have covered in our previous lesson. If you want to learn, you can check that video. And here we are gonna learn the rest of the two parts of asexual reproduction. Starting with pre-assessment question, let's discuss. Question 1 is put a tick in front of the correct and cross for incorrect statement. So basically we have to find true and false statement. The first is rose is an example of asexual reproduction. So, are you agree with this statement? Is it true? Yes, absolutely. Because in rose, we use the stem as the seed. All plants have root, stem and leaf. What do you think? Does all plant have root, stem and leaves? No, not all have roots, stem and leaves. Some doesn't have the stem, some doesn't have the leaves. That's why this statement is not fully correct. It's an incorrect statement. Reproduction can only possible with plants having flowers. That's completely incorrect because if we talk about rose, the plants of rose where the seed is its stem, and the last is sexual and asexual are the two modes of reproduction. That's absolutely correct. Proceed further, and the third type of asexual reproduction is fragmentation. The slimy green patches in ponds or in other stagnant water bodies are algae. You must have noticed if you kept some water in a bottle or in some other object and you kept it like this only for several days, there is a possibility of a green patches in the bottom of that object, and that patches is called algae. When water and nutrients are available, algae grow and multiply rapidly by fragmentation. An algae breaks up into two or more fragments. These fragments or pieces grows into new individual, and that's how the process continues, and they cover a large area in short period of time. So this is another way of reproduction. The fourth and last kind of asexual reproduction is the spore formation. So here we have two pictures. The first is a spore formation in fungus and the spore formation in fern. Fern is like a plant which doesn't have any flower. It's just all about leaves. So the spores are asexual reproduction bodies. Each spore is covered by a hard protective coat to withstand unfavorable conditions such as high temperature and low humidity. So they can survive for a longer time. So for example, when we talk about a bread, you have noticed that in summer they get easily trapped by the fungus, and there are the green spores on the bread surface. So they are spore formation. So they can survive for a long time under favorable condition. A spore germinate and develop into a new individual. So sometime kind of the third reproduction that we have discussed, fragmentation, it's similar to the spore formation. But spore formation generally work with the leaves and with edible objects too. And if you talk about fragmentation, it works with the water. Now, the next topic is sexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction in flowering plant centers around the flower. So basically sexual reproduction is all about reproduction in the flowers. Flowers are the reproductive parts of the plant that we are aware with. And the last or the third point says the stamen are the male reproductive part. That's really important. The stamen, and the pistil is the female reproductive part. Now the next process is the pollination. The transfer of pollen from one flower to the another to the stigma of a flower is called pollination. Self-pollination is where the pollen is transferred to the stigma of the same flower or the stigma of another flower of the same plant. So the stigma means the male reproductive part of a flower, or the stigma of another flower on the same plant. So the two is stigma. When the pollen transfer in between the two different stigma of the same plant is called self-pollination. If we talk about cross-pollination, is when the pollen of a flower land on the stigma of another flower of the same plant. So the cross-pollination happens in between the two flowers with two different stigma, or that of a different plant of the same kind. Here is a quite clear and detailed picture of a pollination. Here you can see the stamen, the male reproductive part, and this is the second flower but the same type. So this is a picture which represents self-pollination. So self-pollination is more reliable as compared to the cross-pollination, as cross-pollination is more wasteful as compared to the self-pollination. So most of the time the self-pollination gives the good result in terms of reproduction. So this is all about the topic today. I hope you cleared with most of the things of the lesson. And here we have some practice questions. If you learn the topic well, you can do these questions, and if you have any difficulty, you can go back to the lesson again and learn it. Explain what do you understand by sexual reproduction. Sketch the reproductive part of a flower. What do you mean by pollination? And define fragmentation. So we will be ending this session here, and for more you can visit justtutor.com. Thank you for watching.